Hi everyone, and welcome to another one of our St. T's Worship Hangouts. These are designed to keep us spiritually and musically sharp in this slightly strange season. It's my huge privilege this week to welcome Nahum Matthews with us. I've known Nahum for a number of years. He'll share in a sec a bit about who he is and where he's from and stuff. But I just wanted to sort of say, you know, Nahum is one of the if not the best drummer that I've ever played with. And in terms of the input and value that he will bring to not just drummers but musicians and singers, I think, in terms of his approach to learning new stuff and that kind of thing, is invaluable. So please grab a notepad if you want to take some notes, or make sure you bookmark this video if you want to go back and watch it again, maybe when you've got your instrument in front of you, because that'll be really useful. Cool. So Nahum, thank you so much for giving up your time to come and join us.
Hey, no problem at all.
Do you want to just share with us a little bit about kind of where you're from, who you are, and what you do when you're not in lockdown at your family's house? What would you normally be doing?
Well, I mean, obviously, like you said, this season's a bit weird. My name's Nahum Matthews. I'm from the Lake District in Cumbria, from a little town called Ulverston. And obviously, I'm, like Jono said, I'm a drummer by trade. I've grown up with music in my family all the way. I was homeschooled until the age of college. So then I went to college and did music at Kendal. And then I also went on to go to LIPA, the Liverpool Institute for Performing Arts, as a university degree to do music as well. So I've spent 4 years doing that. And I've actually, during lockdown, completed the degree. So I'm now an official graduate, which is crazy to think, but there you go. What else do I need to introduce? I think, I don't know, my passion's music. I've played with Jono. I don't know how long we've played together now. It's been since back in the Nisku days of 2010, 11 maybe. I don't even know. It's been a long time I've known before. So I'm passionate. Above all, music is great, but God is greater than the music. Christianity isn't all just about the music side of things. And I'm big about the heart of every sort of drummer, every musician that gets on stage. So I think that's really important. But today, we're going to obviously look at some practical stuff that I do to sort of learn songs, you know, practice etiquette in rehearsals and all that jazz. So hopefully we'll cover a few bases today. Yeah?
Great. So kind of, I know you've already mentioned the kind of heart side. Do you want to just share just for a couple of minutes about like, why is that core? Because I know sometimes when we're approaching new songs that, like, as we're going to chat through in a minute, it can be so easy just to dive straight in and look at it more like we're kind of trying to learn the music and the lyrics and getting it all right. Like, why is keeping the heart right kind of core for you?
Yeah, well, for me, I think above all, you know, I know who's given me the gift of being able to play the drums, and I think that is like, for me personally, that is a big thing. I'm aware that a lot of people, everyone has a certain gift in their life. A lot of people have a lot of gifts in their life that they don't even know about. And fortunately, the Lord revealed to me and like my family and my parents and stuff that I was actually a drummer from the age of like a fetus. So that was something that I had sort of grown up with in church. I started drumming at church when I was about 5, and I was getting drum lessons when I was about 3. So like this was something that I'd sort of knew was something I needed to nurture from a young age and stuff. And I just know that throughout my life, I've gone through wanting to be a footballer, to wanting to be a policeman, to wanting to just do anything but drumming. But the Lord has always brought me back to sort of the drumming sort of stage, and to the point where I was going to do sports in college. But then the Lord sort of showed me Kendal College, and then I went there for 2 years, found my love of drumming again. And so then went on to university to do music there as well. And then through that has become songwriting. I've done more songwriting recently and just developing those different kinds of musical abilities. But that, I think, keeping your heart right is just, it's the most important thing, because a lot nowadays, you know, churches are almost branded, you know, with their music. You know, it's the music is sort of the spearhead for a church usually. And so there is a lot of pressure on people to be good looking, to sing well, to play well. There's you know, it's starting to sort of feel like we're moving into a secular sort of thing. And that's why it's so important to really, like, always come back to that foundation of, why am I doing this? Am I doing this because, you know, there's a girl that fancies me because she plays because like she's a singer and I'm a drummer, so like, oh, like if I play well then she'll like me a bit more? Or is it actually because I want to use my gift to bless people and to forward the kingdom of God? And that was something that really touched me as like as some fundamental thing of always bringing it back and keeping myself humble, keeping myself at that point where, if I was literally just handing out water bottles to people on the stage and I was just off the stage in the congregation, that's still, if God wanted me to do that, that's still worship. And if I did that with the joy of the Lord and with all that I've got, then that is still worship. And then fortunately, I've been given the opportunity to play the drums in many places, and that is such a blessing. And just to always bring it back and keep myself on, knelt down only to God, keep my knee to him, and just making sure that I'm always focusing on the main goal is him. So that, and, sometimes that comes in the form of, I feel him like with his arm around my shoulder when I'm playing the drums. I imagine myself when I'm playing the drums looking at heaven, or imagine myself playing in heaven's rooms and just being in the presence of God like that. Just keeping yourself humble and keeping yourself focusing on the goal is such a big thing for me. So that sort of links into the heart as well, making sure where your heart is the most important thing. So
great. Yeah, that's really helpful. That's a great foundation, I think, for us to start with, because what we are going to get into the nitty gritty of some of the really geeky techie bits of the musicality in a minute, but just reminding ourselves that actually that all comes from a foundation of actually our hearts being in the right place and us wanting to bring God the best of what we can ultimately, and he deserves everything. So actually it's we want to give him 100% of what we can. Nahum, I want to ask you, we're going to put ourselves in a bit of a scenario as we go through the chat today. So we've just got a new song. So new song's just come out. Whoever's leading worship has sent it round. Maybe in our context, that's me saying to our team, actually, this is a song that we're going to introduce at this service, this congregation. Like, for you, how do you approach kind of learning a new song, and why would you do it in that way?
For me, a lot of it has come through, like what you touched on there was, you want to bring the best to God, and I want to bring the best drumming that I can to him. And I think that all once you've got that foundation, say you send me a song and you go, I want to hear it. Like, this is a song we're going to do for live in Lancaster or Resolute or whatever. And, you go, can you learn it? And it's like, yeah, I mean, fortunately for me, I'm actually big into the whole Christian. I did my dissertation on Christian contemporary music and its effect in the modern sort of era. And so I'm sort of big into listening to it anyway on Spotify. I've got a giant playlist of stuff that I like to listen to. So fortunately, I'm not into, like, I don't know, Viking metal or something. So it's actually quite enjoyable for me to learn a new Christian song, because I actually, kind of enjoy listening to it anyway. Now, how I would learn it, I would immediately, before anything else, I'd look on Spotify. I'll go on Spotify straight away. So, I mean, I don't even know, like a new song that's come out, maybe Prophesy by Influence Worship. That's great. That's a great tune. Immediately you'd send it, and I'd look on Spotify immediately and save it to my playlist to listen to for the next couple of days straight away before anything else.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, we'll take an example. Have you heard Graves into Gardens by Elevation? So
yes.
That's a new song that our congregation, unless anyone watching is a massive Elevation fan, like we haven't introduced that yet, but that's got quite a distinctive rhythm to it as a song, and there's certain points in that song where it goes further than it being just, it's bog standard 4/4, what I would 6/8 that one, but like it's bog standard. We know the time signature, but like as we're approaching to learn it, and as we start listening to it on Spotify, YouTube, or whatever people use, you'll start to hear as you listen to it, there's that bit in the run into the chorus, or there's that bit here, or there's that bit there. Like, how would you go about kind of preparing yourself to play it for the first time, and looking at all those intricacies, and how do we kind of, I suppose my question is, how do we bring the identity of the song out without it feeling like we're just becoming an Elevation cover band, and we're still bringing something authentic of our own worship, but we're not losing the essence of the song by doing that? Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. I think what I would first of all do, like I said about if you sent me you said, we want to do Graves into Gardens in the next couple of weeks, or we want to do it next week, or we want to do it tomorrow, immediately, go on Spotify, save the song, listen to the song. Like, that is just, for me, you don't type in, I don't type in on Google and type in the lyrics and the chords and then try and figure the song out from there. You know, I'll listen to it and listen to it again and then listen to it again. One thing that saved my life is a notebook. Right? You go into the song, and even if you think you know the song, when you come to play it without the backing track with it, it's a different kettle of fish, because you can't, certain things, whether it's the backing singers who do an ooh before the second verse that sort of helps you recognize where the second verse is, sometimes that won't be there in rehearsal. So then you've got to rely on, do I actually know the song for what it is? And so what I started doing was I get my notebook, I write down verse 1, or like intro, 8 bars, and then something that happens before it goes into verse 1, like they'll say, I've searched the world, right? So then I type in, I write down, I've searched the world, verse 1. So then I know that that's where verse 1 comes in. And then and then sort of listen to how the drums go. I'll just write brief notes. I'm not the best at music theory, but I sort of write down what I understand, because it's your notebook. You can write down whatever you understand. So write down the kick pattern, the groove, anything that sort of makes it. I don't think there's actually any drums on the first verse, if I remember correctly. So I just write down no drums, ambience if needed, whatever. And then you go, I just go through the whole song. Verse 1, chorus. Verse 2, pre-chorus, chorus, and then intro chords, and then bridge. And then, so you write down the whole structure of the song on your notepad and write out anything you need. So any drum patterns that are in the second verse that you need to write down, any pauses that you need to write down. If there's a pause, I write down the lyrics before the pause and after the pause. So then I know that the pause is coming up. So it just familiarizes yourself with the structure of the song. So that's what I'd do.
Great.
That's I can't remember what else you asked. There was
so we kind of got the structure. I think sometimes as well, there's really particular, whether it's like electric guitar or key, you know, we're not speaking just to drummers here. Like there are drum bits, but there's specific like little hooks or things, or even like the texture of the sounds that we use. So I know, like for you, you'll think about kind of how your toms sound, or like what cymbals you might use at different points to bring particular sharpness, or like how open you might have your hi-hats, depending on how sort of thrash you want it to sound. And you know, I know for keys players, you'll be thinking about kind of what texture you want your pads to be, or electric guitarists might be thinking about, oh, how much distortion or reverb do I need, and all that kind of stuff. And for vocalists, you'll be thinking that stuff through as well. Like how prescriptive do you learn the song? So do you just learn the structure, or would you what micro detail would you analyze it down to?
To me, I think you've got to, like, obviously speaking from a drummer's point of view, or if I was learning for the piano, I think you've just got to micromanaging it to a point. Is that the right thing to do? I mean, I probably would do that. I would, because I sort of hear the different instruments and go, oh, that needs to sound like that. You know, the bass needs to swell at this point and everything like that. So you sort of, you look at the song and you go, that's a great song. Well, what makes it a great song? Take the lyrics away from it, because the lyrics are brilliant in the song. But you know, the musicianship, how does that influence the song? How does that make the song? Why does that make you tap your foot along to the song? When that bridge intro comes in, it goes like dun, 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 dun. Why do you want to jump up and be like, oh mate, that's brilliant? It makes you want to clap your hands to it, because there's something about the song that sort of gets you going. And so to me, as a drummer, I tend to look at how the snare drum sounds, how each individual tom sounds, like you were saying. And I guess as a leader for you, you know, you listen out for stuff that you have to listen out for every instrument to make sure everyone's playing their part correctly. So in terms of micromanagement, I guess it's difficult to answer that question really, but because I've just waffled there. But to me, the only way you can begin to micromanage something, and the only way you can learn a song properly as a musician, is by listening to it. If you're wanting to play the song, you've got to listen to it and get the foundation sorted. And then, for instance, I have a certain style of drumming, and every other drummer, or every other guitarist, every other bassist, every other pianist has a certain way they play their instrument. And everyone wants to stick their stamp on it. Everyone wants to go, this is Graves Into Gardens, but we've got my man Jono playing the keys, and you can tell it's Jono playing the keys because he does this lick, or you can tell it's Nahum playing the drums because I like the fill he does, or I like the groove he plays, and he sort of switches up. But the only way you can get to that point is by knowing the song like backwards, inside out, blindfolded, with earmuffs on, everything. That's the only way you can start to then build off that foundation, because if you don't have that foundation of the song, the knowledge of the song, the knowledge of the structure, knowledge of where things go, you can't put your stamp on it. And if you put your stamp on it, it sounds pretty bad. So that's I remember the example I have was by a mistake that I had made, and you can sort of learn off this. So anyone who's watching can sort of learn from my mistake on this one. Is that we used to play a youth service called Live, and that was sort of where I became really good friends with Jono, was at these live events. Was it every month, Jono?
Yeah, it was, yeah.
Every month in Lancaster. And Jono was like, oh, let's learn a new Wren Collective song. And I remember I didn't listen to it. I didn't listen to the song because I was like, oh, I can just put my own stamp on it. They like the way I drum. Like, I'll just sort of listen to it once, on the way there. And I think I actually forgot to listen to it. So I get there and he said, oh, we're going to play through this in rehearsals. And I'm like, oh my goodness, like I don't know the song. So then I sort of lagged my way through it and did some sort of like samba rhythm or something to the song. It just sounded terrible. I'm not gonna dress it up. It did sound terrible. And so that was a mistake that sort of pushed me to go, I don't want that to happen again. I don't want to be disappointing to my fellow bandmates, because at the end of the day, you have a responsibility to your other bandmates to make sure that it sounds good, because everyone sounds bad if someone doesn't play the right chords, or someone misses the one drop, or someone misses the pauses, or someone misses the stabs. Like, it just makes it sound terrible. Like, not terrible, but it makes it sound worse than it could do. So that's why it's so important to build that foundation of listening to it. Don't just listen to it twice and think you've got it. If you think you're that good, then that's fair enough. But like for me, I'd take a notepad, listen to it. If you need to listen to the verse 1 twice to get it sorted in your head, then you pause it, write down what was there, go into verse 2, write down what was there. And that's how I sort of do that if I'm learning on the fly, which is sort of what musicians do week in, week out with the amount of Christian music that gets released nowadays. So for me, I'd learn from my mistake without making it, and making sure that you listen to it, prep beforehand. There's no harm in listening to it over and over again for like a couple of days. Like, so what? You're getting used to the song, building that foundation. So that's
yeah.
me.
No, and I think what you said as well about there's a couple of things that I thought were really helpful there. Like, I think one thing was actually something that Sem brought out on a previous Hangout, which if you haven't watched, make sure you give that a watch as well. About like it being really intentional about why particular parts are in a song. So actually, when you're listening to a song and think, oh, what's great about that? It's not an accident that there's a particular fill in a particular part of a song. Like, whoever's written that song, the hours that have gone into the pre-production, which we don't see on the most part. But like those of you who have listened to the Christ the Rock and Holy Water recordings that I've done, Nahum was the drummer on those. And I remember when we were recording those in the studio, we spent a good amount of time, didn't we? Like literally doing one fill, and then we'd listen to it back and be like, oh, I'm not 100% sure about that. Let's like just remove one beat. So rather than it being like 1, 2, 3, 4, it became 1, 2, 4, and you missed the 3 out. And then suddenly, oh yeah, that just brings that out a bit better, or that adds a bit of anticipation. And when artists, whoever it is, whether it's someone local or someone international, are producing a song, like there's a very specific reason why they've put that particular bit in. And I think sometimes for us to ignore that, or us not to at least acknowledge that, is actually not doing the song justice in that sense. So I think that's really, really important, really helpful. How do you find, Nahum, that by learning a song to that level of detail, do you feel that actually restricts your creativity or your own personality? I know you talked about putting your stamp on it, or are there still ways that we can, without kind of detracting away from the identity of the song and making it sound like a samba rhythm in the middle of something completely inappropriate, but like, are there ways that we can still kind of be ourselves and bring our own creativity and spontaneity sometimes, where we can go around chorus again, or like there are times we'll want to do a song slightly differently in structure. Like how do we fuse those two things together by like holding the identity of the song itself, staying true to that, but yet still having space to be ourselves and be spontaneous?
Yeah, I think like for me, what I get from, I guess, that question, like you were saying with the stamp side of things, it is just about you. The foundation of it is so key. Like I can't stress that. Like you were saying with, learning something to the detail of, putting the 1, 2, 3, 4, taking out the 3 and that fill for like Holy Water. We poured over the drum part, and like that was it was a long day, wasn't it, really? But like in the end, you listen back to the song and you go, well, that was definitely the right decision we made there, because there's been recordings in the past that I did at university with students and stuff that we didn't take much care in, where we put fills, where we put guitar solos, how many guitar solos you put in a song or whatever, and then you listen to the song 3 times and you're like, that's really good. But you listen to it a 5th time and you're like, this drum fills, this extravagant drum fill's getting a bit boring now. I can't listen to it, and it just becomes an assault on the ears. And especially with worship music, the instruments aren't necessarily there to be, shone upon. It's the lyrics that are the important part, because at the end of the day, the lyrics are and the lyrics are the most important part for a Christian song, in my opinion. And I think that opinion is broadly held in terms of, there are definitely spotlights that sometimes there is a drum part where it's just the toms, and the drums then obviously a bit more front and center. But for me, the musicians are there to support the lyrics and to paint the picture of the song. If it is about water, use some cymbals when it's quiet, to make it like water, or sort of paint the picture of, Graves into Gardens, that I remember talking to my dad the other day about, because my dad loves Graves into Gardens, and we were saying when they say those parts, you turn mourning to dancing, it's like da, 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 da. It's almost like hammering in that sort of prophecy almost, and the biblical truths that are held in that bridge of the song. So, the music paints a very good picture and sort of takes you on a journey where you sort of never been before. And I know I sound like really cryptic when I say that, but you sort of understand it when you listen to that song and you go, wow, if they made the decision to do that as a production team in the studio, that's a really good decision, because it brings to life those words and sort of hammers them into people and goes, he does turn mourning to dancing, he does turn graves into gardens in people's lives. And then so that for me is again, like, that's just down to foundation parts, I guess. I can't really remember the question anymore, so I'm just waffling again, but I'm sure you'll remind me and bring me back to centre.
No, that's great. And yeah, certainly I think it's just really important for us to just have that. It is a sense of discipline, I suppose, and it's not a sense of like unnecessary discipline, but I think it's just knowing that by putting the time in the week when things are busy, and we all accept that is the case, but whether it's listening to it when you wake up in the morning or in the car on the way to work or whenever, just familiarizing yourself. And like, I've been watching this really interesting guy called Leonardo Torres on YouTube, who is a guy who's a musician who's not a Christian, although he's on some kind of faith journey, but he wouldn't describe himself as a Christian, who's been listening to worship music and analysing it. And it's fascinating to hear his observations of it, because he's listened to it for the first time and he's analysing it from a musical perspective. And when I've listened to him analysing songs that I already know, it feels like I'm listening to them for the first time. And what I'd encourage each person to do when you listen to a new song is to do, like when Nahum said, have your book and write stuff out. You'll be amazed at rather than just listening to it passively in the background, listening to it with the purpose of, actually, I'm going to dissect what my part or what my instrument is doing. You'll find there's like hundreds of things that you wouldn't even think about normally, that when you actually stop to listen to it, you'll hear like, oh, the melody does a little trill here, or, oh, I can hear that there's like one sentence where the kick pattern changes and it emphasizes that word, or, you know, and it's amazing how much detail you can pull out from something that you wouldn't even realize there was that much detail in the first place. So yeah, I'd really encourage you when we're approaching new music and new stuff to do that. Nahum, have you come across any online resources that have helped? I think sometimes maybe I know I've found in the past, sometimes there's stuff that I can hear is happening, but I can't quite sit down at the instrument and immediately work out exactly how to play it. Do you know what I mean? So if people are in a position where they're kind of listening to stuff and they're going, oh, I can hear there's a really cool electric guitar part there, or I can hear that the drums are doing some kind of really fantastic fill, but I just can't sit down and work it out. Are there any sort of YouTube channels or websites or kind of resources that you would say you found, or just processes that you found useful for doing that?
There's quite a lot out there. I mean, the most simple one for me was there's a song called By Elevation as well, called Call Upon the Lord. And I didn't actually know the drum pattern to that song. And I was like, oh, I wonder how they play it. So, you know, simple YouTube search, first thing comes up is the drummer. I can't remember his name right now. It's not Luke, but it's someone else. And he does a whole drum cam video of it. And he also does a drum cam version of Graves into Gardens, because I've seen it on his Instagram. So if any drummers for your church are wanting sort of that and they've got Instagram, just hit him up on Instagram, and you can see a video of him actually playing Graves into Gardens, which obviously would be really helpful. But I didn't realize in Call Upon the Lord there's he does like a tom, he basically does like a tom groove with the snare, and I didn't think there was anything else to it. Because of the volume of production, I couldn't really hear other parts in it. But he has a hi-hat going with his stick the whole time, and I didn't even know. I didn't even hear it on Spotify. But then looking at the YouTube video, I was like, oh wow! And then playing it back, I can actually now hear it on Spotify. I can hear that hi-hat going because I saw it visually, him doing it, and I was like, oh wow! You know, he actually does that part. So then I was practicing with that. Took me a while to get my left hand up to speed with the hi-hat, and doing the tom groove as well with my right hand. So that, I think practically there's always, you know, I'm assuming a lot of the people who are in your worship team and probably who will listen to this video are probably on the younger side of generations. So, you know, you just go hit up YouTube, you type in the song that you want, type in drum cover, and usually you'll be able to find the official drummer who actually plays the song live. So then, you know, that's how I'd sort of learn those kind of parts. And as well, just keeping up to speed. I think what we can also touch on here is the practice side of things. Even just this morning, I was practicing the songs that I like playing, maybe the songs that I don't like playing. Like Call Upon the Lord is a difficult song to play. You know, you listen to it and it sounds like, oh, Call Upon the Lord is difficult to play, Nahum. And like, it does sound quite easy on Spotify. But if you actually try and play along with it and play the exact groove where the kicks are and where the snares are, it's actually a lot more difficult than you think. And then along with the hi-hat on the side of it, you're like, flipping it, this is an absolute workout. So I would always encourage people to practice, you know, outside, practice songs you like, practice songs you don't like. You know, the practice side of things is so important for any sort of musician. And I think to sort of think that you can go Sunday to Sunday, not picking up your instrument, but picking it up on a Sunday morning and think that you'll be better than you were last week. I don't mean to sound like offensive, but it's like a naive musician thing where you think you'll be all right. And then you think that comes into other parts of your musicianship. So then you think, oh, if I've listened to it once, it'll be all right. Or if I listen to it on the morning of the Sunday, even though Jono's asked me 2 weeks ago to learn Graves into Gardens, I'll be able to pick it up. And then all of a sudden you listen to it really stressed on a Sunday morning because you're like, oh my goodness, I haven't listened to this before. And then it's a lot more difficult than you actually first thought it was. And then you're letting the whole of the team down because they're having to start late because you're there with your phone trying to listen to what the first verse sounds like. So like those practical resources, I'd say relatively easily found in the 21st century. That's what I'd do. YouTube, hit up any, I'm trying to think of any other places that I could sort of, but Instagram's a great place for that kind of thing as well.
Yeah, it is actually. I've seen a few things on on different people's Instagram for that. And there's a website called Worship Online as well. You have to subscribe to get some of their content, but they have brilliant tutorial videos of yeah, usually there's definitely, I've seen drums, electric guitar, but they do bass and keys and other stuff as well. I think the other thing that I've noticed about the way that you play and the way that you are, Nahum, is that because it's obvious that you do that preparation in advance of when we have a rehearsal time together. Firstly, you're the most disciplined person I think I've ever been in a rehearsal with, in as much as because you know what's going on and you're there with a purpose, the time is always really well spent, which I think is something that's, you know, obviously, like when we get together, we want to be family. We don't want to run it like a military operation. So having a bit of chat and a bit of fun is fine. But the more that the rehearsal is a space not to learn the song as such, but to simply just check that we're tying up the loose ends and that we know, you know, who's bringing us in, who's bringing us out, maybe just running it with at the tempo we're going to run it for half a verse and just check that everyone's happy playing it at that speed. It's that kind of tying up the loose ends, isn't it? Rather than approaching it as if, oh, right, so we're in the rehearsal before the service and now we're going to learn this song from scratch, because that's often where we'll end up with a catastrophe and a car crash.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I appreciate the compliments on the whole sort of like, you know, being, you know, I guess good rehearsal etiquette. I mean, I can only give testament to being in bands at uni and being in a college environment where people are learning their trade and stuff. From little things I learned in college, you know, there was this whole sort of thing where people couldn't sit at their instrument and not play it. And I was like, I learned in college, I was determined. I didn't want to be that guy going forward who noodled on their kit whilst people are trying to talk. I found it irritating when the guitarists, you know, I'd say guitarists and pianists are probably the worst instrumentalists from who I've worked with. They're probably the worst for doing it. So I wouldn't even say drummers are the worst for it, because drummers get told off a lot for being too loud anyway. So usually drummers are actually quite good in not playing their instrument. But just little things like that, you know, turning up on time. For me, as a musician, there'll be times where I'd have to come from Liverpool to Lancaster on the train. There wasn't a train that got me into Lancaster 10 minutes before the rehearsal. So I'd have to get there an hour before the rehearsal. And that was just that, you know, because I didn't want to be late. Being on time for a music rehearsal is actually quite late, because in reality, you get to the rehearsal space, you have to get your instrument out, you have to say hello to everyone, you have to tune up your instrument, you have to plug it in, you have to hear the feedback noise to know that you've turned the gain up too loud on the Nord keyboard, so you have to turn it down. And by that time, you're talking, you know, if the rehearsal's at 7, you know, you're not getting going till like 7:15. That's 20 minutes already wasted. You know, and as a drummer, you know, bringing cymbals in, putting them on and making sure it all sounds all right, whatever. Just little rehearsal etiquettes like that, you know, help move the thing forward and making sure you've learned the material. And like you said, the rehearsal isn't a space to learn the song. Like, that is just not how it should be. You know, you've already learned the song. You're coming in to sort of figure out what the music leader wants to do with the song. You know, you're coming in, so say if you have an idea that you want to go up a key for the last chorus, they're like, no problem, I already know the song already like the back of my hand, so going up a key for the final chorus that's a breeze for me. But if you're coming into the rehearsal only having learned up to the second verse, you're going to have no idea what he's talking about, let alone, you know, learning the actual song. So then you waste a lot of time in a group rehearsal and a group setting with trying to teach individuals how to play their own part, which I personally don't think is the case. But that just came from being in bands where, you know, I was in a fair few secular bands at university, and I tell you, they're a lot less empathetic to people in secular bands than they are in Christian bands. Because if you turned up to a cover band for a wedding and hadn't learned the material that you said you would learn for that week, I tell you, they tell you to leave the room, and they don't tell you to do it in 10 minutes. They tell you to get out. You know, they don't want you there. So that was sort of a drill sergeant mentality that I had, that I wanted to bring. I wanted to bring positivity to the band, and by bringing positivity, not in a sense of happy clappy, a positivity in a sense of, I've learned my material. You're not going to be relying on me to learn the material. I know I've already learned it. You're not going to have someone carry you through the rehearsal or through the service, because you're not going to have to look at the piano player for cues, because you already know what you're doing. And then you can focus on your worship and how you're actually, communicating with the song itself. And then also you can then put your stamp on it without affecting the song too much, but everyone then knows you've put your stamp on it, because that's like your reward. Your reward is essentially you get to put your stamp on it at the end, because you've done the graft of learning the material, you've done the graft of making sure you're not a liability to the band. So then you can go, oh, I'm just going to put this tasty fill in there, and then everyone turns around like, oof, didn't hear that in rehearsal. And that's something that's like a reward in that sense.
Yes.
So.
Yeah. And it allows you to bring out, as I say, it's that beauty, and hopefully through the conversation now, you've seen, those you watching have seen the progression of actually how everything that we've said is built on the next thing. So then at the end here, because we've listened to it 20 times on Spotify, because we've got our notepad out and we've learned it, because we've really got it in our heads, because we've turned up on time or early and set up well, and the rehearsals ran right, and because we've got a good relationship and our heart's in the right place, and all these things are like stepping stones. And suddenly when we actually get to it, we can let ourselves go in worship in confidence that it will all be, it will all be okay. And actually what we're doing isn't going to be distracting for the congregation, but we're actually going to take people with us, and people are led into the presence of God by the musicality that we bring, and not distracted from it by the mistakes or fumblings that go on. Not, obviously we're always going to make some level of mistakes, but avoidable mistakes, I suppose,
100%.
Can happen all too often, I think. Now, before we go, I know that you, as a drummer, which is certainly in our context is very rare, have done some kind of musical direction stuff. So we've just started bringing this in at church. For those not familiar, that's where someone in the band has a vocal mic that simply is there to communicate with the other people within the band. So you'd hear it in your ears, but you wouldn't hear it out in the congregation. So it allows someone within the band to be able to kind of communicate with the rest of the band and hold things in motion. I think there's maybe a misconception among a few people that I've spoken to that kind of has to be a worship leader, or that you have to be like a worship leader to have that role, which I know when you've done it, like, I don't know what you describe yourself as, but I know you do lead worship from time to time, but predominantly you're doing it not as a worship leader, but as a drummer. Like, how do you find that? And I suppose that again is just a natural progression on from knowing the songs inside out and having a flavour for where they're going. But how do you, from the drums, or for other people maybe from another instrument, or even kind of singers who might think of themselves as just kind of backing vocalists, like, how do we not just see ourselves as a little part of the band, but how can we maybe grow into a role like that? Or how do we kind of develop that insight so we can help steer where the band are going if we want to take on that role of musical director?
Yeah, musical direction is so important. I mean, I've worked with a few musical directors in my time, working in doing theatre shows and stuff, and it's fantastic. I'm not gonna lie, like it's fantastic. You've got to be the coolest head in the building to be able to take on that role of MD and know the sort of power that you've got. And also, I think to take on a role of somewhat of a musical director, you've got to have a good knowledge of all the instruments, of how they work and how much time they need to prepare to go to another chorus, or how much whatever. You've got to have a good sense of direction of where God wants to take it as well. You've got to be switched on spiritually to where the Lord is taking the song. And also you've got to have that great relationship with the worship leader, most importantly, because you've got to be on the same wavelength. Because if you go, okay, let's go back into verse 2, and then they want to do another chorus, they shout out to the crowd, oh, and let's sing grace in the ground again, or like, let's go back to the chorus. And then you're like, oh dear. So then you've got to have that connection with the worship leader. I think it's a great idea though, that whole thing, and moving into that. I've done a lot of practice with my drum tutor in my last year of uni to do musical direction on the drums, because it's a lot more difficult to sort of play the drums and be able to sort of say, okay, we're going into verse 2, and whilst you're playing. so that's been something that I've been learning. So learning how to read a book whilst playing the drums out loud, so you can actually, do whatever. But how does someone grow into that role? I'd say the most important thing is you've got to have a good knowledge of every instrument and be able to hear everything as it should sound before you sort of move into that role. That's my opinion. And you've got to be a cool head for that kind of thing. You've got to have a really cool, calming head, because you're speaking to the rest of the band. You could make them crumble, or you could sort of build them up. So I'd say those are the two probably most important things to have as a musical director. As someone who talks to the band, you've got to have a cool head, and you've got to sort of have a great knowledge of how all the parts are moving together in the song and where the song should be going. So.
Yeah, and I say at the minute we're in, for those watching on delay, we're in June 2020. We're still in lockdown in the UK. So who knows quite when we'll be gathering back together and what that will look like, and even what worship will look like beyond that. I think there's still lots of question marks up in the air, but certainly for us as a worship team, and potentially for other teams watching this as well, that might be something that's familiar, or like you're starting to kind of grow into or experiment with, or maybe you've watched other churches online and you can see someone kind of talking and you can't hear them and you're wondering what's going on. But I think that's a role that we'd love to at least explore and experiment with a little bit. So maybe if that's something that you feel like you'd be up for kind of growing into that, or that you'd be up for kind of exploring what that looks like and how it works, maybe that's something that you could contact me about if you're part of St. T's. Nahum, it's been so great to have you with us. We hope, I've been saying to everyone at the end of these Hangouts, hopefully we can have some kind of worship thing involving all of our different guests at some point.
Yeah, that'd be amazing.
It's going to probably be in the more distant future than the near future by the sounds of things. But it would be great to have some way of kind of gathering all these Hangouts kind of together. And keep your eye out. Those of you who are connected with us at St. T's will undoubtedly see Nahum again sometime soon, because we love having him around. Thank you for your time. It's great to be around.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. And just keep going, at the end of the day, it's a volunteer thing, you're doing it out of the love for music and stuff. So, keep that love up, guys, keep loving what you're doing, improving what you're doing every day, keep that practice time up. So that's my parting words really for you guys. But yeah, I would love to do that. That'd be sick. Anytime you need me, Jono, to text me anyway. So yeah, let's get something sorted for the near future. Let's do it. So thank you very much.